we made some good tracking.
Do you want to do before you go? Do you want to do my classic poof or drown hypothetical?
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, you've never heard of it? Okay, perfect.
Sure. Before I go, this is what we're ending on.
Yes, it's kind of fun, and there's no right or wrong answer.
Let's do it. Yeah.
It's the days of Noah. Okay,
Okay.
but you've already died. You're in heaven with Yahweh.
Okay.
And but the Old Testament hasn't been written yet. You can't see the future.
Okay.
Yahweh comes up to you and says, oh, Joe, look at all the people down there. I mean, they're so unrighteous. I mean, it's terrible, terrible situation. But I do like Noah. He's a righteous man. I'm gonna execute my justice here, Joe. I'm either going to drown everybody on the planet, these evil men, women, children, even the animals, or I'm just going to poof them out of existence. I mean, they won't even see it coming, except for Noah's family. And these are both moral options because Yahweh himself is giving them to you. And he goes, Joe, what say you? What should I do? I'm going to do whatever I want to do, but I want to hear your opinion. Should I drown them or poof them? What do you say, Joe?
I would say that's a great test, God. But we both know that you need to display your justice and wrath against sin to show us how holy you are, and to let people off the hook without displaying your justice and wrath would be an immoral thing because they have all sinned against you, who are a great big God. So you need to pour out as much wrath and destruction on people that have sinned against you as possible, and we both know drowning's the right option.
So you would go with drown?
Yes.
Okay. We're still in this hypothetical.
God has had a very bad day if he's asking me for advice. Like, I just have to have.
He's not asking for advice. He just wants your opinion. He wants to know your preference. Okay, you're married with kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how many kids do you have?
3.
3. Okay. Yahweh comes talks to me, and you see Joe there. He has 3 kids, but for morally sufficient reasons, I have to execute my justice against his 3 children. Mm-hmm. And I'm either going to drown Joe's 3 kids in a neighbor's swimming pool, or I'm just going to poof them out of existence. They won't even see it coming, no pain, nothing. What should I say to Yahweh? Poof or drown?
You know, probably one of the worst calls in EMS I ran was a toddler drowning. And you asked if I had any doubts a while back. And one of the things that probably shook me to the core and rattled me the hardest was having to watch children die. And ultimately, what I've come down to is that has given me a greater passion for the gospel, to go on atheist shows and tell them the good news that Christ died for sinners.
Hey, Joe,
I recognize that even my children deserve to be destroyed, not only in a drowning in this eternal life, but in eternal fire for eternity, because they are by nature sinful creatures that have rebelled against a holy and good God. And that's why they desperately need to know that Christ can save them by his blood and atonement.
Is your answer drown with your own kids?
It has to be, dude. It has to be. And I'm telling you, the reason I mentioned EMS is that I don't come to that decision.
But hang on. I think you misunderstand my hypothetical. I'm saying
I know your hypothetical.
I'm saying both are moral and just.
But they're not.
No, in this hypothetical, they are.
No, but they're not. There's no way those are ever moral options, because God is a holy and just God. And when you sin against him, you deserve eternal wrath and punishment, which is why the gospel is so important. Why it's so important for people to know that Christ died for sinners. That is radically
But what if your kids
crazy.
Are actually saved? I mean, you're assuming they're going to hell. I'm just asking for reasons unknown to us.
Oh, we were in the times of Noah, and only Noah's family was going to survive. Right.
But no, I'm talking about today.
You're saying my kids are saved.
I'm saying today. I don't know if your kids are saved or not, but I'm saying today, if God came up to me and said, hey, Doug, I got to get rid of Joe's kids, either poof or drown, what do you think I should say to God? Poof or drown? Would you rather have your kids leave planet Earth and go to heaven through drowning or through poofing?
Well, in a hypothetical argument that is not actually going to affect our worldviews, I think we both know the answer. We want less suffering for our families.
Okay, you would go with poof with your own kids, but you go drown with the children back 3,000 years ago?
In the hypothetical that they're all saved and just leaving the world.
Okay.
If they are not saved, and we're talking about how God is dealing out his justice.
Okay, now, Joe, let's change it.
Okay.
God tells me your kids are not saved.
Okay.
Poof or drown.
Obviously, if I get a personal choice in the matter, I'm not God and I don't want to see my children
Poof.
suffer.
Okay, you go with poof. Why do you go poof with your own kids and not with the kids 3,000 years
But,
ago,
but what I'm
4,000 years
saying
ago?
is that's not a viable option if you have a holy God.
What's not a viable option?
We've made God way too tiny in this hypothetical. We have decreased who they have sinned against. We have decreased who he is. The only possibility for people that have sinned against this God, this great, big, almighty, omniscient God, is eternal justice and
I'm not
destruction.
talking
And
about eternal justice. I'm talking about just how they die here on planet Earth. And so the options were how they die, poof, or drown. You said drown with the people in the Old Testament times, which includes a lot of children, toddlers,
mm-hmm.
babies. You want to
Yeah,
change your answer? You want to go to poof, or do you want to stay with drown?
no. Poof is a silly option. And if you're going to have sin and destruction and problems in the world, at least give the parents some closure. Your kids just disappear. That's just weird.
No, no. Everybody is either poofed at the same time or drowned at the same time. Just like the Bible says, well, I guess it took 40 days maybe, but
Sure, on a purely human horizontal level, and I get to decide how someone dies, and I'm not God, and I don't have his omniscience, and I'm not him, then sure, poof sounds great. I love that. That's a great fairy tale world that I wish we lived in, but we don't. But sure, poof.
you would go with poof now.
Oh, well, if we're erasing it from what God needs to do to display himself, yeah. But what I'm saying, the problem is this hypothetical is God is way too tiny for it to make any sense. God is much bigger than you're giving him credit for in that hypothetical.
So you would go with poof, but you believe God actually drowned. Why do you think God drowned? Because he needed to display his glory? Or
Yeah, I think we don't understand how sinning against a holy God is inconceivably bad and
well, we're
terribly wrong.
focusing on this is why I asked about kids. Like we're focusing on imagine a 2-year-old toddler.
Okay.
Do you think 2-year-old toddlers sin?
Oh, well, they're born with a sin nature, so yeah, they've been sinning. Yeah, absolutely.
So a toddler, if they died, they would go to hell?
Well, I would make a biblical argument that I believe God. It's like the dealing with aborted babies too that we murder here in the greatest country in the world all the time. So I believe God. I don't know that I can argue comprehensively and assume on God's election, but it seems that with his heart for children and the doctrine of election, that he brings those babies straight to hell and he saves them. And if you believe God is the one that does the saving, not man, that works out great. I don't think I could argue comprehensively that all children go to heaven all the time, but I think there's a good, strong biblical case to be made for that, even though, yes, they are sinners, but I believe they are elect of God too.
There's inconsistency number 5. If God is just and they're sinners, how is that just to let them go to heaven?
Remember how I said we have to preach the gospel? The gospel is the greatest.
2-year-old, 1-year-old.
Mhm.
A
Yes.
1-year-old going to heaven and yet being a sinner, that's just?
Anyone going to heaven who was born a sinner is nuts. That's why the gospel is so crazy. That's why Jesus Christ dying for people is so imperative.
But they
and
haven't
indicative
accepted they haven't accepted the gospel. A 1-year-old can't comprehend the gospel and make a faith commitment.
Good thing faith isn't based on our comprehension, then, isn't it?
Okay, so yeah, if you're going to go full Calvinist, which is what the Calvinists would say, then you would say some babies go to heaven.
Biblically reformed, not Calvinist, but okay. Calvin would agree with me, but
Some babies go to heaven, some babies go to hell, is what you say.
I think they all go to heaven, but I can't stake a claim there. This is something only God knows.
Okay, and if you're right that babies go to heaven, then really
it's just as scandalous as me going to heaven. I shouldn't go to heaven either. I'm a dirty, nasty, rotten sinner, man. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
It's just as scandalous as me going. And I get the emotional appeal to kids to try to make that more, bring it down home. The problem is what we've done is we've diminished man's sin against the holy God, and we've made God incredibly tiny. And that's the only way that hypothetical works.
Yeah, I agree with you, though, that you shouldn't be too dogmatic about that belief that babies go to heaven.
There's good guys arguing on both sides. The biblical material does not provide an exact yes or no on that.
But if it's true, then really all the abortions are not that bad.
I think that's the one redeeming quality. Yeah. I mean, not bad for the babies.
Right.
The parents just heaped more condemnation on themselves. But yeah, the babies are fine.
Really? You think you can get more condemnation? Like, how can you get more hell?
Well,
It's
um,
eternity already.
yeah, it's true, but the Bible does speak to different consequences for different sin. Specifically, David wasn't allowed to build the temple because of extra blood on his hands, and the only blood there
No, but we're
seems to
talking
be.
about after death.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how hell is worked out. Like there's a part where the devil's in that seems to be a little worse than the place where the people are. But yeah, really, I mean, I don't know that if it gets necessarily worse or less. But
Can I
eh,
ask why you had kids?
why do I have kids?
As a Christian, why did you have children? Knowing that God may or may not regenerate them.
Well, I guess I had faith that part of the way God would bring them to Himself was be putting them in a Christian
No,
household.
before you were even born, God knew your kids would go to heaven or hell.
That's true. That's very true. And I would so much rather trust Him with their salvation than them. I've met my kids and me, and it's a crazy house. So yeah, we definitely need to trust God with their salvation. But we're also commanded to be fruitful and multiply. And then God blesses the parents that raise their kids in the nurture and admonition of the
Okay,
Lord.
but
So
wouldn't it be better to sin and not be fruitful and multiply than risk your child's eternal destination?
no, why would you sin against a holy God when you've been saved from sin?
Well, if you're
Why would you
saved,
return back to
if you're
the
saved
place?
from sin, then can you even sin?
Huh?
If you're saved from sin, can you sin?
If I'm set free from sin, yes, I can return to sin. The Bible's clear about
Okay,
warnings about not
but if you
returning to it.
return to sin, does that mean you're no longer going to heaven?
No, although it could be an evidence of a lack of salvation if I enjoy it and live in it for forever.
Right. Okay. So if you do the occasional sin, you'll be okay. So let's say you choose
But
to.
what if I trust a loving Father? And what if I follow Him and I believe that He's going to work all things out for good? What if I trust the God that I'm serving and I obey His commandments and I trust Him more than I
Sure, you
trust
can
me?
trust him, but that doesn't change the fact that your three kids could all be doomed to hell,
Yes.
right?
And He would be right in that if that's what He
And
chose
you're
to do.
partly responsible for that because you procreated.
I wouldn't be responsible for that. No, I was told to procreate. I'm good before God on that.
No, no, what I'm saying is if you didn't procreate with your wife, then those three kids would not be going to hell. Why did you take that chance?
Honestly, it never crossed our minds. That part of it never crossed my mind. I've never. I mean, you got to realize that question is born out of someone who does not trust God, who does not know God, who doesn't walk with God. And for someone that does, those are things where we trust God. We know that He's going to work it out for good, and He's going to handle it, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I bet you there's a lot of parents who cry themselves to sleep because of their unsaved children.
Oh, I know you're right. I know
Yeah.
you're right.
And then they need to be asked by a guy like me, why did you have kids in the first place? You're actually responsible.
Well, ultimately,
This is the
ultimately,
this is
God's the one that brings
the
them into the world.
sickness of what you believe because I don't have to deal with this crap anymore. But you do. Like cuz I can see it I hate to say this. I can see it in your eyes that for the first time you're actually pondering in your worldview, have
Mhm.
I made this egregious mistake of bringing life into the world, knowing that God can take my three kids and put them in hell after they die? I mean,